Bing bong. We are back in action with another week edition of State of the Bitcoin.
State of
We
Bitcoin.
changed it. Yeah, State of Bitcoin. We changed it up a little bit from State of the Coin just to let everybody know there's one and only coin, and that is Bitcoin. We're publishing this on January 28th. We're recording on the 27th. You got me, Brandon, rocking the Bears jersey. Bear down. We just hired a new head coach, new GM. It's a new era. And then we got DK rolling over here, who's just started writing for BTC Times. So make sure to check out some of his articles there. And shout out to our buddy at BTC Gandalf, who helped has is publishing all of that stuff. That man's doing a million things left and right. So all Bitcoin related. He's the GOAT. So how you feeling today, Dan?
Feel good, man. Rolling into the weekend, feeling pretty spicy. Got 3 spicy waters here. I don't know how long we'll rip today, but I might need to run upstairs and grab more. I don't know.
You drink? That's kind of a surprise. I guess you wouldn't really know if you went to our spaces or anything that Dan drinks alcohol because he doesn't remind everybody every 5 seconds.
Dude, Danny drinks and Brandon blunts. What's going on, man? How you feeling?
I'm feeling like $1,000,000, baby. Let's do it. Let's get into it. We're sitting at 37,200 right now. So the price has dipped down a little bit, but we've seen kind of the move away from correlation in the stock market this week. So you saw stonks red, Bitcoin green. So something I like to see this week. So I was being encouraged going into the weekend.
I don't know. I kind of disagree with that. I mean, we're down over the last week. So from last Thursday, we're down 9% on Bitcoin. The market is just like every day it either goes up to start the day and then comes down to end the day, or goes down to start the day and then goes back up. So like all of these people talking about the volatility in Bitcoin are are experiencing. I think it'd be interesting to look at the volatility between the market and Bitcoin, because it feels like the market's been much more volatile.
Well, I mean, it just really depends like what you're kind of, I guess, looking at in the market. If you're looking at like market indexes, it's like, a 2% drawdown in the S&P 500 is very big. Whereas like in Bitcoin, 2% is like nothing. So it really depends like what you're looking at, growth stocks or, Bitcoin or and S&P 500 or NASDAQ or what have you. So it's kind of tough to compare overall, but I think overall the stock market's been very up and down as well. So yeah, let's get into some of these off-chain stories. I think we've been very busy keeping up with all these Bitcoin related stories and a lot of positive news here. So the first story that I think we should dive into is that Valkyrie, they filed for a Bitcoin mining ETF. We've talked about this a little bit in our Twitter spaces that we've kind of, there's a lot of Bitcoin mining companies popping up left and right and doing a lot of great things. Our good friends of the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast have had, I don't even know how many from different Bitcoin mining companies, at least 3 that I could think of off the top of my head. If you got that number, feel free to jump in. But they've got a few people from Bitcoin mining companies jumping in left and right, all saying very positive things. I would love an ETF to get a little bit of piece of the pie of all these. And I think the cool ticker that they got is WGMI for We Gon' Make It. Shout out DJ Khaled. We gon' make it. So, we the best, we gonna make it. This new proposed fund has at least 80% of its net assets and securities of firms that derive from about like 50% of their profit will come from Bitcoin mining. So overall, I think it's very, very positive for the space. And Valkyrie is also one of the first asset managers to receive SEC approval for Bitcoin's future ETF last fall. So because of that fact, I think that they got a good chance to get this approved. And overall, I would be very interested in investing into this Bitcoin mining ETF. Of course, not financial advice, but what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, Valkyrie was one of the first to roll out their futures-based ETF, and the SEC has, as we'll talk about in the next story, has apparently no plans to accept a spot ETF. So I think a mining ETF is the obvious next choice if you're trying to gain exposure into Bitcoin without buying the underlying asset. And again, we talk often about like why you would want to buy an ETF instead of the underlying asset. Well, this is an opportunity for people to get it into accounts that they otherwise wouldn't have access to Bitcoin. So a lot of retirement accounts, for example, most platforms do not allow you to buy Bitcoin. Now, the platform that you and I use does, which is great, and more people hopefully will onboard to it. But there are still plenty that will not allow you to buy and hold Bitcoin in your retirement account. The other thing is like pensions. So pension funds might kind of have their hands tied as to buying like actual Bitcoin, but they might be able to buy either a futures based ETF or in this case a mining ETF. So I think it's cool. I'll definitely take a look at it. I'll be interested to see like which companies they're going to include. I'm taking an absolute pounding right now on Hut, our good friend Len over there at the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast turned me on to Hut. I think as it was at its top. I think I bought it at its top, and it's down over 50% now. So not enjoying that. But they had on this week, talk about the mining employees that they had on. They had on, oh, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name, but it was a fellow from
It's from
Bitfarms.
Bitfarms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bitfarms, man, that guy, the way that that guy said that Bitfarms operates was incredible to me. So I'm now a Bitfarms stockholder as well. So I'll be happy to see that. And then the other thing too with Hut, I mean, no disrespect to Hut, but they are starting to dive into all of this metaverse and Web3 stuff, which I guess you kind of have to as a company. Like Microsoft announced that they were doing this too, but I don't know, man. Something about it. Like, I just want to know what's your hash rate? What kind of equipment are you using? How are you making sure that that equipment's going to last as long as possible and be as efficient as possible? And Bitfarms sounds like that's what they're doing. The other
Yeah. And
person they had on this week at over at the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast was a fellow from Compass, who I believe was on today.
yeah, and that was Whit Gibbs, the CEO of Compass Mining, and then it was Ben Gannon of Bitfarms, and I believe he was like the chief mining officer was his title, which is pretty cool. But I kind of disagree with you there on the why would you hold an ETF opposed to the underlying asset, because this is a mining ETF specifically, and I think investing in Bitcoin miners is a little different than just investing in Bitcoin itself, because you're looking at, like you're saying, some of the points of how good your equipment, how efficient is your mining, what kind of energy are you using? Is it renewable? Is it cheap? Yada, yada, yada. Where are you located? Are you decentralized? So, or you have multiple locations, so you're not, privy to one jurisdiction. Just overall, like, how does this business operate? Of course, they're mining Bitcoin, which is the underlying asset, but I think there's like a little bit of a difference there. Whereas, you could almost compare it to like investing in gold and investing in gold miners. Although, it's digital, and, we can get into the big differences of that rabbit hole that just opened, but that's kind of how I view it, is that, it's a little bit more about the business opposed to the, underlying asset, at least in this case. Well, and you did bring up earlier too, the spot ETF was rejected again by the SEC. Unfortunately, it comes as no surprise, as I don't know how many. Do you know how many the SEC has rejected at this point? I think there's been at least three or four
At
spot
least,
ETFs.
yeah, at least three. There's this one from Fidelity, and then Skybridge just recently had one, and I believe Wisdom Tree, and I've got let's see, yeah, Wisdom Tree, and
Yeah,
then Van
Van
Eck.
Eck.
Van X
Yeah,
was
so
like
this
one of
is
the
the
first
fourth.
ones.
Yeah, so I mean, it just seems like the SEC just keeps pushing away the spot ETF for some reason. I just think it's weird, because they allowed the futures ETF, and seemingly I would assume that Valkyrie, because they got the futures ETF in there, that they'll be able to pass their Bitcoin mining ETF. But you never know at this point. The way the SEC has been operating, it makes no sense to me. So I'm not surprised by this news. Unfortunately, it just stinks. Like, because like you saying, I think this is a situation where you get a spot ETF in there. You could have pension plans, you could have retirement funds, and all that kind of stuff invest into this, opposed to the underlying asset where, some places might not let you invest in that for whatever reason. Yeah, I mean, I agree that uh, for some reason it won't pass, but I'm not super interested in the ETF. I just think like overall it's good for the space. I don't think I would invest in a spot ETF, because in this kind of spot ETF opposed to the Bitcoin mining one, which I think is a little bit more advantageous for an investor because of the underlying businesses. Here I think it's more so just the underlying asset. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I don't think we'll get one. I don't think we'll get a spot ETF. The other thing too that's interesting to me is that they already have these in other places. I know Canada has some. Joey and Len have talked about the spot ETFs available to them, and for them, again, it's one of those things that they can put in their savings or retirement account, and they can't hold Bitcoin in their retirement account. So being able to hold the spot ETF is big. I know. I know that the SEC has come out and said things that there's just risks associated with spot, but I don't know the exact reason, but I don't suspect that we'll see a spot ETF this year. And to be honest, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters in the macro for Bitcoin one bit. I might be wrong about that. I might be completely wrong about that, but I fail to see how it makes any difference. There's now so many options to get access to the underlying asset. I get it. I get what you're saying about the mining companies, because mining companies have access to other cash flows. They could sell rigs, they could create ASIC chips. I know that I believe it was Brian Brooks from Bitfury was saying that they've developed like immersion cooling technologies and high performance ASIC chips that they are now creating. They're using the technology that they developed for Bitcoin mining, and then they're spinning it off into other applications. Right? I think he compared it to NASA. Like when NASA went to the moon, one of the things that came from that was the microwave. I believe tinfoil came out of that. So there are spin-off technologies that are created, and then they can sell those technologies. So if you can create a high-performance AI chip, then you could sell that. And so I totally get that, and that's one reason that a Bitcoin mining ETF could outperform, or an individual Bitcoin miner could outperform the underlying asset. With spot, all I see is that you're getting the underlying asset and you're paying the trading fee. So I don't understand it in cases where you're trying to put it into an account where you otherwise don't have access to the underlying. But there's now so many platforms. I mean, come on, like if you're looking to hold Bitcoin in a retirement account, get out of Schwab. Schwab's not going to let you do that. There are platforms out there available, that will let you hold Bitcoin in your retirement accounts, at least in the US. So in my opinion, I'm not interested in these spot ETFs. I won't buy one. I'll keep buying coins, man. So I'll keep buying sats. Are you following at all, Brandon, this bits versus sats thing on Twitter?
Oh no, yeah, I am seeing it, and it's ridiculous. I don't know. I mean, we were at the Bitcoin and blockchain conference here in Tampa, and some guy was trying to call bits and sats and different things by like Simpsons characters. So I mean, it's ridiculous, but I mean, what's the big deal here? I mean, they've been called sats for such a long time that I think it's just new people getting into the space and not knowing what to call it, and just saying, okay, well, it's a full Bitcoin, then just bit, whatever. But I mean, they'll learn. I'm sure they'll learn. But yeah, I mean, the one point I do disagree with is I think like overall for the space, it's good because you still have people that manage money for older people who don't know the technology, and it will allow people to get exposure to it and not be fully like, okay, I own Bitcoin. It's like, okay, I own the ETF. It's a little bit less intimidating, a little bit less scary. Maybe it's not going to be as volatile as the actual underlying asset. And some people are just more comfortable with ETFs and stocks and things like that. So overall, I'm like I said, like you and I and experienced Bitcoiners might not be interested in it, but the mom and pops and maybe the grandparents here or there, they might be the ones that are more interested in this kind of movement. But let's move on. We got a little bit into the ETFs. Now let's move on to like some government type stories because there's been a lot in the news lately. So last week we covered that the Russian central bank was like, you know, saying no, like we're not going to be doing anything with cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. And Putin came out and said to tell the Russian central bank, excuse me, to pump the brakes. He was basically saying back at the central bank that the proposed blanket ban on the use of mining of cryptocurrencies on Russian territory shouldn't be stopped. That Russia's rich natural resources, cheap electricity, and cold temperatures make it like a great place for Bitcoin mining. We see it a lot going on in Canada there. I mean, we have a lot of exposure to the Canadian companies just because the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast. So we hear about how they're using the heat and everything else up there, and how it's not exactly a big issue, especially during a time like right now when it's the winter there. Whereas I'm down here in Florida, the heat putting out there right now, it's going to be like 50 degrees and we're freaking out down here. Other than that, it'll be 70 and it'll be way too hot to have the let off heat and things like that. So I think the natural resources and everything like that Russia offers makes it very advantageous for Bitcoin mining. It's just, the whole the uncertainty of their government and what they'll do. So I was kind of surprised to hear Putin say this, to be honest, but who knows, like maybe Putin will jump in and Russia will get in on Bitcoin and it'll cause like a snowball effect where other bigger countries like China and the United States don't want to fall behind. So they'll implement something along these lines as well. And we got another story coming up later about the United States sort of jumping in and talking about cryptocurrencies, but we'll get into that later. What are your thoughts on like Putin telling Russian central bank to pump the brakes?
Yeah, absolute botch job by you on that story. I'm joking, man. Just tripping over yourself left and right there.
I just worked out, second workout of the day. I don't like to brag about it, but I'm a beef guy these days. So I don't know. I'm seeing double, making triple. Shout out Drake.
Living single.
Oh yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, I want to actually lump this in, Brandon. I know that you moved the Kazakhstan story down, but I think the Kazakhstan story plays into this nicely too. So Russia, as you just mentioned, especially in Siberia, has abundant access to natural resources, cheap electricity, and cold temperatures. Perfect setup for mining operations. In fact, this is one of the things that led to a bunch of miners migrating into Russia after the Chinese ban on mining last summer. So after that Chinese mining ban, the percentage of global hash rate on the Bitcoin network jumped from like 8% to 11%. And it pushed Russia into the top 3 countries in the world for mining Bitcoin. It's the US, and then Kazakhstan, and then Russia. And so Russia's ranked 3rd on that list. Imagine if you just have a blanket ban, which is what the central bank of Russia was proposing, a blanket ban on not only using cryptocurrency, but mining it. So now you wouldn't even be able to mine. It could be, it would just force, Putin's got to see the writing on the wall. If you do that, you're going to force those miners over into the US or Canada, which were the other 2 major gainers from the Chinese ban. Now you have to ask, like, why did Russia and Kazakhstan get such a pump when China banned Bitcoin mining? Well, it's because they're right next to China. It's hard to move those things across an ocean. So you can just move them from China into Kazakhstan or Russia pretty easily, right? And this is why I wanted to lump Kazakhstan in here. Kazakhstan shares a border that is just over 7,500 kilometers long with Russia. And Kazakhstan, for the next week or so, has kicked their miners off of the power grids. And just 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was rolling internet blackouts in Kazakhstan amid political unrest that kicked miners off the grid. So, or it kicked them out of the network. They didn't have access to internet. So, anyways, Kazakhstan is the second largest contributor to global hash rate on the Bitcoin network. And if you kick them out, or if there's this much instability in whether or not you're going to be able to be on the power grid, whether or not there's going to be internet access, those miners in Kazakhstan are going to start looking to move. And if they can just go straight up north into Russia, like if Russia's friendly, they're going to go up there. Why would you spend the money to move everything over to the US and Canada if you can just go straight into Siberia? Right. So like as a geopolitical move from Putin's smart geopolitically, man. And I think that this is a smart tactical move from Putin.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that 100%. Just because, yeah, backing up all the points you're saying, it's so close. And why would you reject something that it's like Bitcoin's not going anywhere? It's such a high price right now. It's such a large market cap. What is it? I know we've had a big dip recently, but it's top 10, top 15 in market cap globally. And it just doesn't make sense to reject something so big that's been around for so long. And there's more and more people developing whatever you want to call it. Like the ecosystem's growing and the use case for Bitcoin is being proven over in El Salvador, which we'll get to in a minute. And, and it's rolling out in other countries. So I agree with you 100%. Like, why would you reject something like this? It doesn't make sense to me. And so, yeah, it's a smart move from Putin, to say the least. And, I can't believe I'm saying that, but we'll see like where I think it'll be like an interesting month and a half to kind of see where Russia goes with this after Putin came out and said this. So
Yeah. I do. Let's
go ahead.
let's do the U.S. story next, and then we'll go into El Salvador and the IMF because you're
All
right.
right.
I think you're exactly right about the U.S. having to play keep up with Russia. I think we have to, right? And there's already a little bit of unrest between the U.S. and Russia, and I think it's a no brainer. You have to be on board. Like you have to compete with this, and I'm shocked that China's not trying to jump back in here. I really am. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of months we saw a reversal on China's policy, but who knows? I also don't think that this is in any way going to stop Russia or the US from developing their own digital currency. I think these CBDCs are here to stay. I think they're going to be rolled out. I think they're going to be used for mass surveillance, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, like, look, man, if Putin can concentrate as much mining power as he can into Russia, he's got control over this massive industry that you were just talking about. I mean, across all of cryptocurrency, it's like a $3 trillion market cap. It's massive.
Exactly. And yeah, like you said, they're going to want control. They're not going to want to it's everything. The movement now is unbank yourself, get yourself free, be financially free, control it. But it's really, everybody's doing these KYC exchanges and everything like that. So, except for a few people here or there, the people deep into the weeds in Bitcoin and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of countries, including the United States, they're not going to want to lose that power that they already have. The United States is a global reserve currency right now. They're not going to go down without a fight, so they're definitely going to develop some CBDC and yeah, exactly. Like have it for surveillance. They're already starting something like that with our bank transactions of $600. And, we've heard floating around that if you're putting money from one bank into a Coinbase account or something of that nature, we've heard people come into our spaces say that banks are shutting down banks accounts and things like that because they don't want to encourage you to be investing in anything of this nature. So, we're seeing the banks already kind of rebel on it. And if the central banks get a hold of it and the central bank develops a CBDC with the United States government, that'll be the perfect scenario, I think, for the government, at least for in their eyes. Obviously not in ours or anything like that, but I don't think they want to lose that power. And yeah, it's basically going to be like, all right, well, we're seeing what Russia's doing. We got to do the same thing. And we're going to be playing catch up, unfortunately, instead of being one of the leaders in this space, which, I wish the United States would be going to the forefront of this, but because we have, the global reserve currency, I don't think that, we would be we got the most to lose, so why would we jump in?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Number two, that's an excellent point. And it's like it's no surprise that these LATAM countries are the ones that are adopting it first because they have to, right? Look at El Salvador. They were relying on the US dollar. It's something they've got no voting power over. They have no say in what happens, the policies that happen in the US that ultimately affect how much their money's worth. That's insane. That's insane. They're their own country. They're a sovereign country, and they have no say in what happens to their currency. So it's no surprise to me that these countries that feel that they need to have their own currency are the first ones looking to adopt Bitcoin. Like Brazil's looking like this now. Venezuela would be a great candidate. So it's not surprising to me. Now, speaking of the US staying at the forefront, let's jump into all of the things that have been happening in the US. I'll let you introduce the story, but before we do it, I'm going to say let's create the backdrop. In December, we had a Senate hearing on stablecoins. Last week, we had a congressional subcommittee hearing. And when I say hearing, is basically they bring people in and they talk about a topic for 5 hours or something. Last week, we had a congressional subcommittee hearing on energy usage in cryptocurrency mining, and the Federal Reserve released their paper on central bank digital currencies. So with that being said, that's kind of the backdrop. And obviously, I think a lot of people know there's all these politicians taking paychecks in Bitcoin, saying that they're going to create Bitcoin-friendly environments, things like that. So it's obviously a growing interest amongst U.S. lawmakers in cryptocurrency and specifically Bitcoin, which I think is really nice. I don't see a lot of politicians saying they'll accept Dogecoin, for example. But regardless, there's obviously a growing interest amongst U.S. lawmakers in cryptocurrencies. So with that being said, the next story I'll let you introduce.
All right, so the next story I got, kind of is along the lines of the government, is the IMF tells El Salvador to drop BTC as legal tender.
No.
So the executive.
Let's do
you want to do the Texas story?
No, let's do the Biden. Let's do the
Oh, the Biden story. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So like essentially rumors are swirling that the Biden administration is preparing to release an executive order detailing government strategy around cryptocurrencies is how they worded it. So apparently they're tasked multiple federal agencies such as like the Treasury Department, Commerce Department, National Science Foundation, National Security Agency, yada, 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 was studying department-specific pros and cons on the use of cryptocurrencies. And so the overarching goal of this order will be to create a more organized and cooperative approach to regulating the growing cryptocurrency industry. And so kind of like we were saying before, is like they just want control. They want to be able to make rules around it before it's gets too big, because they've kind of ignored it up to this point, up until recently, up until all the things you just named that happened. And because they ignored that, now they're realizing, oh shit, this thing is too fucking big. Now I gotta make some rules about it, essentially. At least that's how I'm viewing it. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, you have all of these stories building up, and at some point it's too big to ignore. It's cryptocurrency, like we just said, $3 trillion market cap. Russia's getting involved. Turkey's having meetings with El Salvador. It's it's getting too big to ignore, man. So they've got to do something at it. I view this pending or looming executive order as a way for the White House to try to get at the center, try to get themselves into the center of the regulatory process. I personally don't like this. For those of you who maybe are outside of the US or don't fully understand our three-party system, or not three-party, our three-branch system, the White House, the executive branch, is not really supposed to be issuing executive orders determining law. We've got a legislative branch, which is the Senate and the House of Representatives or Congress. They're the ones that are supposed to create laws, right? Now, the president, the executive branch, ultimately has to sign off on those laws. But we've seen increasingly over the last 2 or 3 decades that we're just kind of bypassing the legislative process and we're just issuing a bunch of executive orders. So to me, it signals that they're taking this seriously, but it also signals that when it's an executive order like this, 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10 at this point, this ends up becoming a political issue, which we don't want. We do not want this to be a political issue, right? Like, but Bitcoin is not about political parties. It's about individual freedom. It's about getting away from like the central banks don't care about your political views. Let me tell you, they don't care if you're left or right. They're going to try to take your money. So the one thing I'm hoping is that it doesn't become a hot button political issue in the US. However, I think it's going to. So I see this, though, generally as the White House's attempt to get into the middle of the regulatory process so that it doesn't get taken over by the SEC or the IRS, or it doesn't just become like, it's a security. I see them as trying to get themselves into the middle of it to say, oh, no, we'll figure out a way to regulate this. And if you don't like it, then we'll just push through some executive orders. So that's the one thing that has me concerned about it. But the one thing that I do like about this is that it's a clear signal that they're taking this seriously, that they're not just brushing it off. And when they start taking it seriously, that tells me that it's a serious topic. And I think that leads nicely into the IMF El Salvador story. Like the IMF is now starting to say they're worried. We've got them on their heels. So why don't you break down the IMF story?
Yeah, just one quick point to what you were saying is that I think that it's already kind of becoming a political issue. Just because politicians are realizing like, hey, if I run on Bitcoin, or if I take a paycheck in Bitcoin, or if I do something that's going to be good publicity for me, and that's going to get people on my side, even if they don't follow the Bitcoin ethos, which we've noticed with like the New York mayor, for example, or governor, or whatever he was, who still is, shutting everything down and yada, yada, yada. But, I think that, yeah, like Josh Mandel, for example, he was in a big Twitter Spaces with Bitcoin Magazine. He was supposedly a small, no-name guy. At least that's what he was trying to portray himself in that Twitter Spaces. And, he got a lot of good publicity from that. He got a big article written about him and everything like that. So I think a lot of these politicians are just realizing, hey, like this is something, like this is my shot. This is how I'm going to get big. This is how I'm going to get a big following. This is how I'm going to get a crowd of people who are behind him. Because some of these politicians, they view like crypto, Bitcoin, what have you, almost as like, a cult because of how strong the following is. I mean, if you get on Bitcoin Twitter or something and you say something about, Web3 Ethereum, like you're gonna get people to go at them, when like, for example, like when people come up and try to talk about, various things on our Twitter Spaces, we have people like that challenge their beliefs and things like that too. So, the Bitcoin Twitter and Bitcoin space is they want to make sure that your stuff and do everything like that. But at the same time, I do think like politicians kind of see it as a way in and as a way to get a lot of votes. But yeah, so other than that, I agree with
let me
everything.
piggyback on that too. So I think you're exactly right about it's the mayor of New York. It's the new mayor of New York City, who I believe his name is Eric Adams, but I might be butchering that. He took 3 paychecks or something in Bitcoin, and the entire Bitcoin community is applauding this. They're not even looking at his policies where he's continuing to mandate that people do certain things to get into restaurants. For example, we won't say it here because we like our channel and we would like to we would like to maintain on your view list. So we won't say specifics, but I'm guessing most people in the Bitcoin community would be pretty upset if they knew that those were his policies. Here's a good standard. Are you a politician who is just taking paychecks in Bitcoin? Or are you a politician who is creating an environment where Bitcoin companies can thrive? Are you going to create state legislature or city legislature or whatever it is, whatever level of government you're at, that facilitates Bitcoin companies coming in, building their products, doing it in a way where they don't feel targeted by excess taxes or things like that? That to me is why I like Loomis so much. Like Loomis really seems to get this. And it seems like this new guy I believe he's running for governor in Texas, seems like he gets it too, where they're trying to, they don't care. I don't care if you take a paycheck in Bitcoin. I really don't. I care about you as a politician, creating an environment where Bitcoiners can thrive. That's what I care about. And then the other thing I'd say too, before we jump into this IMF story, and nothing against Bitcoin Magazine, but here's a good way to do this. If you ever have a politician on that is a pro Bitcoiner, the first question you ask them is why is Bitcoin different from crypto, and why does Bitcoin win? Those are the first two questions you ask a politician when they come onto your space. We did this organically when we had that California politician just randomly enter our space. And we told him straight up, you're gonna find out that we're not Web3 people in here. We're not Ethereum people in here. We're not the hedge your bets 50% Bitcoin, 50% Ethereum. That's not us. We're Bitcoiners, and we're going to take you to task on whether or not you truly understand Bitcoin. So I would just say, in the future, for anybody that has these politicians on, ask them straight up. The first two questions should be, explain the difference between Bitcoin and crypto, and then tell me why you think Bitcoin's going to win. And if they can't do that, then they're not a real Bitcoiner. They're just grifting.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, and I mean, you got to ask these guys some tough questions. I felt like, in that space specifically, there was a lot of softballs, and that's fine. You want people to come back and do all that things, and it's kind of tough to go and challenge some people. But I also think it would have been good to get some of the big name people that decided to come and listen to that space to come up and ask some questions. So yeah, I mean, we kind of discussed this a little bit last week, and that's what I like about our Twitter spaces. And podcast is a little bit different of an environment, but if a politician wants to come into our Twitter space, we'll welcome them with open arms. We'll try to educate them if they don't know, and we'll also try to gauge and how genuine they are to learn and everything like that, because everybody's at a different space in their Bitcoin journey, I think. And I think, like, to expect a politician to come in and know everything about it isn't fair. But I also think that, as long as they understand the ethos, the premise of it, and, they're willing to learn about it, and they're not willing to they're not using it as a ploy, as I kind of described it earlier, just to get more votes.
Well, they literally, man, we'll probably not be able to cover all the stories we want to cover, but that's fine, because I think it's better if we just rip on this. So they literally, in the middle of that spaces, said, we probably have 100 people in here. And I don't know, there's 400, 500 people in the space. They literally said at some point, the hosts, we probably have 100 people in here that know more than we do that could ask you great questions. Invite them up. You're in a Twitter space. That's what Twitter space is all about. You're not on a podcast.
100%. Yeah, like 100%. I mean, that's what they're for, right? I mean, we've discussed this last week too, and it's like, it's just very frustrating that, I mean, people got bigger audiences than us. I mean, that's fine, but I think if I was in that position, and we both of us were in that position, we would have handled it a little bit differently. And I think, like, it would have been a better conversation, to be honest. But unfortunately, we weren't in that position, and maybe we'll get in the future. Josh Mandel, we got an open invite to the Green Candle Spaces.
I invited him. But we invite all these politicians. You look at Joey and Len too; they do the same thing. We are always inviting these people, and we always want them to come in. The guy that came into ours from California told us that he would be back and has not showed up since. And we've seen him in other spaces about Web3 and things like that, and like NFTs and whatever. But you're free to have those beliefs, but you better believe when you come into a Bitcoin spaces, you're going to get challenged on those. Because if you're telling people that you run on this platform that's super pro Bitcoin, but you don't understand Bitcoin enough to know that to be messing around with like NFTs, it's like, well, you probably don't really understand Bitcoin, or you're comparing the two. Like, look, I've seen some generally good uses of NFTs. Like, there are some good things, I guess, that you could get out of a blockchain backed technology. But let me tell you this, it ain't fucking pictures of apes or cats or fat penguins, right?
Oh, dude, respect my lost apes. R.I.P.
Well, it's like, but then we see these politicians in these same spaces, and you're like, oh, I see what you're doing. You're going into the largest space that's going on in the general crypto area, and you're grifting, which is what I feel like happened to us. But we challenged that guy, and I don't know, I can't really remember what kind of responses he had. That was our 5-hour rip, and I was big time drunk, so I don't fully remember, but
no.
But yeah, man, let's do Brandon, let's do the IMF story, and then we can talk a little bit about on chain. I know I don't care how long we go. The only thing is that when we go this
Yeah,
long, fucking downloading this thing is going to be a real miserable. So
that's all right. It's just your computer, so fuck it, right? So anyway, the IMF tells El Salvador to drop Bitcoin as legal tender. So essentially, the IMF concluded their consultation with El Salvador this week, and they urged El Salvador to drop Bitcoin as legal tender, stating that there's large risks associated with the use of Bitcoin on the financial stability, financial integrity, and consumer protection, as well as associated fiscal contingent liabilities. They urged the authorities to narrow their scope of the Bitcoin law by removing Bitcoin as legal tender status. And Bukele went on Twitter and just basically dragged his nuts all over the IMF. It was awesome. He just went at them and then purchased another 1,500 Bitcoin. So I mean, it's a crazy world that we're living in right now. That we're seeing a guy like Bukele in El Salvador going at publicly on Twitter of all places, going at publicly not only the IMF, but he went after President Biden and the United States government as well. So it's like this guy's got some damn nuts on him. But we should insert the Stan Marsh in South Park just dragging his nuts in the wheelbarrow here, because this guy Bukele, he's just going at everybody left and right. And I mean, good for him. He's a true Bitcoiner through and through, and I think is outstanding for the space because he's the one that's like, okay, I'm gonna take this on. He's like standing in front of all the bullets, so the next countries can come in and they could have a little bit easier of a time because he's the first one to do it. So he's gonna get all the stabs everywhere in the back and what have you, and now it's free reign, and he's made his stance very, very clear, and it's exciting to see. What do you think about all of it? And big balls, Bukele, triple
big,
B's.
dude, big. Oh no way, triple B. We always know as big ballers. BBB, big ball Bukele is shit, man. Maybe he joins that family. I don't know. But I want to clarify one thing before I jump into what I think. So they bought my notes on the sheet here might be wrong. They bought 400 last week. So 400 new Bitcoin. They now hold over 1,500 since they made it legal tender. And they're also getting ready to kick off a $1 billion bond, Bitcoin backed bond, 500 million of which will be used to help construct Bitcoin City, which will include a mining base powered by a fucking volcano, which is like insane, man. But yeah, this is awesome. And man, let me tell you, one of the reasons Bitcoin is so appealing to so many people is because you're unbanking yourself. You're taking yourself away from this industry that for so long you've seen it hold down probably your family, your friends. You've seen these banks don't care about you. You've seen them come after houses when mortgages go down. You've seen them come after cars when you can't make a car payment and other things too. And it's like, after the '08 collapse, when none of them went to prison, when we knew that there was things going on that they shouldn't have been doing. In fact, a lot of them just got bonuses or moved to new companies and they all got bailouts. And it's just a dirty, dirty thing. And you really do feel like you're David in a battle with Goliath. And El Salvador, this tiny LATAM country, is going to battle with Goliath. And I'll be honest, man, they're winning. They're really winning. The president of El Salvador, the IMF tells El Salvador, drop Bitcoin as legal tender. And the president of El Salvador tweets IDGAF. Like, it's insane, dude. The balls of this guy.
Insane. It's insane. This guy just walked in just like, what up, fuckers? And just gave everybody the bird. It's like, I am here and I'm here to stay. It's incredible. I mean, this guy, the sack of nuts on this guy is incredible. It's insane.
Yeah, but as as individuals, you and me, I mean, we're obviously not C-suite folks. We're not wearing tuxes. We're not driving in, well, I'll speak for myself.
Thank God. Please take that back. I want that off the record and deleted. Audio guys, scrape that last bit.
We'll scrape it post talk. Don't worry. We'll scrape it after. But like, we're not getting personal drivers to where we're going. So in a way, I feel like El Salvador. I feel like I'm just a person that's trying to figure my own shit out without having to deal with nonsense from the bank or without having to deal with nonsense from anybody else. And like, I think that's why so many people are drawn to them, because so many of us, when you're on the phone with the bank trying to figure something out, or and they tell you something, and or whatever the case is, what do you want to tell them? You want to tell them to go fuck themselves. And this is what Bukele is doing, right? So good on him, man. I'm happy to see this. And it's again, I think it's also a signal that the IMF is maybe a little worried. They're maybe a little worried about Bitcoin.
Oh, just a little. Yeah, I think they're a lot, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, Bukele came out and he said, that he thinks, I think it was at least two more countries designate Bitcoin as legal tender within this calendar year. So, after this with the IMF, it'll be interesting to see if more countries just go and flip them the bird and get and make Bitcoin legal tender. But what do you want to do? Let's just roll in. We'll breeze through these next two stories real quick. We got Core Scientific. So Core Scientific is now going public. It's a leader in high performance net carbon neutral blockchain infrastructure and software solutions. And it announced that this week it's combining with power and digital infrastructure under the ticker XPDI. And it'll be available for investment, be listed on NASDAQ as CORZ, CORZ. So yeah, another company in the Bitcoin space going public on NASDAQ. So overall, just good on the space. More and more of these companies getting larger and larger, and it's getting harder and harder to ignore as we're seeing more and more of Bitcoin slash crypto, I guess, if you want to mention that, but more and more of this attention, especially not only from investors and people globally, but also from like politicians and big corporations and big things like NASDAQ. So overall, very, very bullish and positive for the space. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Just to clarify, the new ticker will be Core. So this is one of those SPACs where these two companies, like this other company helped provide the funding for them to go public. And so now they're a combined company, and it is going to be CORZ, CORZ. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know much about Core Scientific. I know that they're kind of leading the way and using renewable energy resources to mine crypto. And so we'll see. I don't know. It's like I'm watching what's happening with Hut 8 right now, and I'm thinking that this is just going to be happening with more and more of these people that are hyper focused on the ESG narrative, which the ESG narrative, it pisses me off, man, because there's these miners, like Great American Mining Company is using excess flare from natural gas. And that's technically not a renewable resource. It's like you're just flaring this shit into the atmosphere. And you've got this Bitcoin mining company that wants to come in and use that energy to mine Bitcoin. And somehow you're telling them that they're like a terrible thing for the environment. I just don't buy it. And so the ESG thing, when I see people that are like hyper focused on this net carbon neutral ESG, part of my brain says, we got to watch out for you. Like, it's exciting stuff, but we got to watch out for you, because when push comes to shove, when the government knocks on your door, which they'll do if you get big enough or create something important enough, what are you going to do? How are you going to react? And what is that going to mean to your shareholders? And so I don't know. Well, it's something to keep an eye on for sure. And I won't provide investing advice, but I probably won't be buying cores. I probably won't be buying cores until I see what happens over the long run.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I might not be buying in it either, but yeah, like I said, overall good for the space. I agree. The ESG narrative, I don't know. I feel like it's beating a dead horse at this time. So many of these uninformed people just don't really think it all through. And we talked about a little bit in our last week's show, but if it's a cheap renewable energy, why wouldn't you keep using it? It doesn't make sense. And they're just going to keep making excuses and just keep coming at it, because I think it's just like a power thing at this point, and people are buying it. And so Unfortunately, they're debunking it. And it just takes getting educated, which is the ultimate transition to Texas, the home of the players and pimps, is now, they're very bullish on Bitcoin. They're launching the Bitcoin Foundation, which is kind of centered around just like educating Bitcoin and research, and funding research of Bitcoin, to kind of just, widespread education of it. And so, we have Texas that's also very friendly to Bitcoin miners. A few of their politicians and running politicians have come out and said that they're going to stay friendly to Bitcoin. Then we've also had Austin, which is Austin, Texas, the capital, which is, trying to become the center and the capital of Bitcoin. It's very Bitcoin friendly. Our friends over at Choice hosted a block party with Oshi, where was very big and popular. Got some big news where people could buy and sell beer and food on Rainy Street there using Bitcoin, things like that. So a lot of big things happening in the Bitcoin space in the state of Texas. And somebody that grew up there, it's really cool to see, and I'm excited to go back and go visit some of the Bitcoin meetups there, and just see what's going on, because I think it's starting to become one of the leaders, and I think it's just going to keep on trucking along. Uh-oh, Danny Chugs.
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me about the art, at least the article that I pulled up about this, is that they're saying they're partnering with like scholars and labs and educational institutions. Look, a lot of our audience knows that I've got a PhD. I put my time in the institutions. I put 10 years into academia, and let me tell you where things don't get innovative. Let me tell you where things don't get pushed forward in a timely and productive fashion. Academia. If you want a project to die, push it into academia. So I would just hope that the people that are in charge of this foundation are allocating funds appropriately and not dumping money into research projects being performed by people who are career academics, who have no experience in the real world, in the free market, and don't know how to push a product to market, or take a product to market, or market a product, because those things are absolutely crucial, especially in the Bitcoin community. You have to have marketing down. You have to have a presence on Twitter. You have to be active on the Bitcoin Twitter. Like, you have to understand the memetics. One of the things that makes Bukele so awesome is that he understands the memetics. He's got a damn McDonald's hat on his on his profile pic now, I think. So if you want to stall progression in whatever you're trying to push, whether it's like, hey, we're trying to develop a new ASIC chip or whatever it is, if you want to stall it, push it into academia, because they'll spend years just having meetings about whether or not they should do it. So I would be cautious about the foundation until I figured out exactly where they're allocating money. And, I say that thinking that they care what I think, but yeah, it's just as an outsider looking in, I see this statement that they're going to be funding research projects via scholars, labs, and educational institutions. And I think, wow, that's going to be a giant waste of money. So
Yeah, I mean, I was in that space too, just not quite as long as you. I don't have my degrees hanging behind me like you. I know you got them blurred out, like we can't tell what all three of those things are back there. But you know, just don't act like you're that ashamed of it, Dan. You loved academia at one point in time, but
dude,
I
those
agree. It's
those are drinking awards. Those are
oh
certificates that I
yeah.
got for drinking so much. They're like a drinking
Oh,
competition certificates.
I got you. So you got some participation trophies back there. Makes sense. Makes sense. You got those hanging up. Congrats for participating. And
Those
here you go. Here's your piece of paper.
those are karate certificates.
What is it, that Napoleon Dynamite in there? You're getting there, and you got the guy with the full on just like American flag pants and the cut off red shirt. That's who your instructor was, and then he just gave you a piece of paper afterwards. You went to 3 classes though. Credit to you. But back to the whole Texas academia thing, I agree. Things are very slow paced. I think that there's like a sense of urgency when you when you're running a business, because if you're not profitable, if you're not actively researching, actively putting up product, actively marketing, actively being involved in the space or anything, you're going to fail. And if you fail, like, you lose your company, you lose your job, you lose your career, you lose money. Whereas in academia, it's like, okay, well, the funding ran out for this one project. Okay, that project dies. At the end of the day, you're going to be okay. You're going to still have your job because it's state funded and everything like that. You're going to still be able to probably get grants for other projects because you're working on 5 different projects at one time. And it's like, oh, well, I'm working on this, and this. Oh, well, Bitcoin's in the back burner because I can't figure out how to monetize it, or I can't figure out something groundbreaking or something like that. Or I'm just going to write and put out some bullshit paper where I could just get my name on it and I'm going to publish it to other academics. And then that's it. So yeah, I agree like 100% on the whole academic spot. I think it's good in a sense that it's getting publicity and it's getting people more exposed to it. I hope that, when people actually put pen and paper and read and do all these research things, and because Bitcoin has a quote unquote white paper, maybe more academics will read that and they'll dig into that a little bit more, and that'll get them into a different rabbit hole. And maybe they'll find like somebody like Saifedean, who was in academics at one point, and something like that. That's where I hope it goes, is like, okay, well, they take a step outside of the academic realm because they realize like, hey, this hasn't been in academics before. So we don't really have a game plan for this. But, I could also see it going the other way, like you said. So we'll see. I think overall Texas is very bullish on Bitcoin, and I'm happy to see that it's as bullish on Bitcoin. And I think everything that comes out is positive, but you also got to be a little bit wary with some of the things that come out too. So I agree. I'm a little wary as to where the research and how it's going, but overall, I think it's a positive for the space.
Well, the other thing too that I'll point out is that for people that aren't aware, so if you develop a product in university, even if you're a student or a faculty member, most universities have a thing in your contract that says whatever you develop, we own. The university owns it. And so they'll take, like, no joke, 75, 80% of whatever you get when you start selling it. And I don't know if foundations like this can come to an agreement with the university where it says, hey, you can develop something there, but then we get to sell it. But I would also just point out, like, that's the case too. And so the people in academia that are doing the research, developing products, they're not incentivized by the market dynamics of like, well, we need to sell this so that it's profitable, or we need to develop it so that it's profitable, because they don't get the profits. The university gets the profits, right? So they're not thinking about, well, what would it be? What would the cost be if we scaled up production? They're not thinking about things like that. So, and like, I had firsthand experience with this where there was a product developed, and there's no incentive to make that product as cheap as possible so that you can maximize profits. None. There's none, because the profits go to the university. You don't get those profits. So, and they don't factor it in when you're going up for tenure or anything like that. So I would just point that out too. And again, like, I'm glad to see that there's people out there trying to educate people on Bitcoin. That's what we're doing. But Brandon, look at you and I. We're doing that without dumping money into academia. We're just sitting here talking. I'm drinking a few spicy waters. I see you don't have any drink at all. In fact, it seems like you're pretty dehydrated. And so, like, I
am.
I don't think you need to dump a bunch of money into research to educate people. Like, it's clear. It's so easy to educate people now. You don't need to dump a bunch of money into it. Now, it's one thing if they wanted to say like, hey, we want to do research on developing a better ASIC chip. And to do that, we're going to go to the best electrical engineers, et cetera, et cetera. That's one thing. But it seems like they're specifically focused on education. And to me, it's ironic because if you want to stall out education, go to our education system, because our education system's so bad at educating people. Like, it's insane, man. Like, just use YouTube. I learned so much on podcasts. I listen to 3 or 4 podcasts a day, and I'm not, there's no textbook I'm picking up on Bitcoin. No way.
I mean, to play devil's advocate to your point, this is government funded. And what does the government also fund? Academics, right? So at the end of the day, the government still believes in academics. And it's neither here nor there, whether or not our opinion on academics. Obviously, we both have strong opinions on some shortcomings in academics as a whole, and we've highlighted them here. But at the end of the day, it's coming from, it's the government paying themselves essentially, right? So it's using taxpayer money to try to educate people on Bitcoin. There's a lot worse things that they could try to educate them in. They could, be doing something like critical race theory or something like that. Hopefully we don't get canceled for that one. Maybe we should beep that out. But
just so the audience is clear, Brandon is a Latinx, so he's allowed to say these things.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's useful for them to to use the money for at least trying to educate people on Bitcoin. Whether it's successful or not, time will tell. And I think pushing it on people might be a good move going forward. But let's move to some of the on-chain stuff. So what do we got? We're sitting at price right now. We got a little bit of a dip since we started. We were at like 37.4 at the peak of our show here. And we're sitting at, or no, wait a second. Yeah, 37.4. We're sitting at 36,000, about 800 right now. So what are your kind of feelings of the price? I know we had a big drop recently from, what was it, like low 40s, 44. We were still tipping on fofos, and then we dropped down to, I think the lowest was 32. Is that right?
Yeah, we got down to the 32s a little bit. I mean, look, I don't know. We can talk about this on-chain stuff. There's going to be a little bit in the newsletter. I like the SOPR metric. I'm getting, just based on the feedback that we're getting like through Twitter and stuff. I think I'm going to get away a little bit from the stock to flow model. Although I would just point out to people, like, the stock to flow model is not trying to predict day-to-day prices. And if you listen to any of Plan B's podcasts or anything, he'll tell you, like, this is also, he didn't develop this model. Stock to flow is a model that's been applied traditionally to precious metals like gold and silver. And it's not going to be precise, and it's not going to give you good day-to-day predictions. So, the stock to flow model is predicted at, I don't know, whatever it is, 100,000 right now, and we're sitting at 37. And so people say, oh, that model's way off. And they'll also point out, like, oh, and the Plan B will say, oh, well, it's within one standard deviation downward. And people will say, well, if the standard deviation is 30 to 150, how useful is your model? And the point is that there's not going to be a model that gives you good day-to-day price predictions, right? So I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about whether or not to keep including stock to flow in the newsletter. It's still performing pretty well historically. You might not like it right now over the last 3 weeks, but it's performing pretty well historically. So I don't know. I'm on the fence about that. But the other thing too, I'll point out, I like the SOPR metric just because it gives us an idea of whether or not people are selling at high losses when we get dips like the one that we're in now. And by the way, I'm looking at the SOPR metric now, and we're not seeing that. Slight negative, but we're still bouncing up towards 1. So we're not seeing huge sell-offs, even though we have good volume. So volume saw a slight uptick this week. Trading volume saw a slight uptick this week, and we didn't see a huge dip in SOPR. So that to me tells me that people are buying this dip. So I'm bullish.
Say volume again.
Volume.
What the fuck is that, dude? Volume?
Volume.
You say it like volume with
no.
I don't know. What are you, Canadian?
I'm saying it like I take like Valium, like the drug Valium.
Yeah, what the hell is that?
No, we're seeing high volume, and the SOPR is staying like right around 1. So we're not seeing people sell this dip, which to me is super bullish. I think we're seeing people buy the dip. And if I ever felt the need to pay for tier 2 of Glassnode, like, the metrics would be off the hook that I'd be putting out. You know that. Everyone knows me. I put out good metrics if I have access to good data. I'm unwilling to pay the tier 2 price. All right. It's not on my list.
Hey, if you want to send sats to us, we do have tips enabled on our Twitter account, so we could get a little bit better of Glassnode.
Yeah. Or tell that Texas Foundation to shoot us over some money.
Amen. I have a little access to data for my current job, and I'm not going to get into that.
I wouldn't. I'd leave that right where you left it, right there. Uh, but yeah, man. Other,
Right.
other than that, like that's the on-chain stuff. With all this stuff going on off-chain, Brandon, tell me, like, how important is it to you to know? I don't know. I'm looking here, spent volume of greater than 10 years. How do you would you
Well,
rather have access to the spent volume of 1 week to 1 month, or knowledge of Bukele going balls deep on the IMF, or Russia's Putin coming out and telling their central bank, nope, we're going to actually go forward with crypto, or the US saying we're going to come up with an executive order? Like, to me, the off chain stuff, the macro, is so much more important, because what we want right now is mass adoption. And we're looking for these avenues of what's going to be best to get the most people possible onboarded.
well, I think, yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think, I've said this a couple of times in various places, but I think that more and more countries are going to come on, more and more countries are going to put, Bitcoin in their global reserve or whatever, balance sheet or whatever. I don't even know what they call it in countries, but they're going to be holding Bitcoin like El Salvador. And they're going to realize like, okay, well, we gotta hold this thing. And then more and more companies are going to do the same thing. So all these larger players are going to come in and they're not going to sell, right? So all these countries, companies coming in, big players, these whales are going to come in, buy it all up, and then just hold forever. And what does that make an asset do? I mean, it's just simple like supply and demand. You decrease the supply, the demand's gonna, go up if there's a scarce asset. And we all know Bitcoin, is 21 million digital scarcity. So I think the on-chain stuff is kind of interesting right now. I just think it's going to be, as we get farther along this rabbit hole, and we get farther along closer to the next halving, I think it's going to be harder and harder to use on-chain metrics to predict the Bitcoin price. And we've heard big on-chain guys like Willy Woo and Plan B and your boy Will Clemente even come out and say things like that. So
Well, to me too, Brandon, it's
I
like,
can agree with it.
to me, it's, we're not even trying to predict price, because I'm not going to sell. I'm not going to sell. This is the money of the future. Why would I sell that? Why would I sell that for the money of yesterday? Like, the only reason you'd want to predict USD exchange rate, which is what it is, it's no longer a price, it's an exchange rate. The only reason I'd want to predict USD exchange rate is if I plan on selling some of this. And it's perfectly fine. Like, everybody's in their own situation. I'm saving up for a house right now. I hope that I don't have to sell any Bitcoin to afford the down payment. And if I needed to, then I would be interested in price. But at the moment, I'm interested in the macro, because I'm legitimately thinking that this is going to be the global reserve currency. And so it's interesting too, because you're a data analyst, I'm a data analyst. We're both data oriented people. And it seems like the farther down the rabbit hole I go, the less interested I am in the data, and the more interested I am in what's going on off chain. And our readers probably know this, because our off chain section is growing, like growing, more stories. And our on chain section is basically shrank to the three metrics that we like, which is just price and SOPR. And we're starting to throw hash rate in there too, because I think hash rate's important, but
Well, I also
not for
think too
predicting price.
I also think there's an aspect of it that the price has been kind of relatively stagnant to down. So like when you're looking at price and it's just kind of floating around to, what was it? Like it was floating from 40 to 44K for 2 or 3 weeks. It's like, okay, well, we keep reporting the same thing. Like nothing's really happening, right? So there's nothing super interesting going on in the data. There was a big dip in the in the price this past week or so. And there's still nothing really crazy going on in the data to show like, all right, this is the reason why, at least the data that we have access to right now. So, either we get better data to go in and try to figure out why, or we're going to keep like reporting the same metrics, and they all look pretty promising moving forward. I know you talked about stock to flow a little bit, and how like some people have some negative connotations around there. I still think it's something good to look at and report and analyze, because there, although it's dipping below, there's points in times where it got well above the stock to flow model too. So, Bitcoin's a volatile asset. Most people that get into it or have heard of Bitcoin have heard that one once or twice, probably multiple times. And, you got to be able to stomach the downswings in order to stomach the upswings too.
And that's
so you're going to get them both.
Yeah. And I mean, so look, the stock to flow model thing, just to hang on that for 1 second. Mario Gibney, our friend Mario, I don't know if we can call him a friend, but our Twitter acquaintance, Mario Gibney, his big point against stock to flow is it doesn't take into account any of the off-chain stuff that we've been talking about. And that's 100% true. It's like a pure, what's the stock, what's the flow? It doesn't take into account any of the off-chain, any of El Salvador adopting it as a currency, if Brazil did it, if any of that, doesn't take any of that into account. And it's 100% true. And it's a good criticism, right? The thing is, though, is that like, there's still these underlying dynamics of like, they're real, like we really can. It's harder to predict what the output of gold will be, how much gold will be mined, than it is to predict how much Bitcoin will come out, right? So like we can still kind of get a hint at it. And I get it. But again, every model is oversimplified because you can't take into account everything in the world. It's going to take someone very special to predict when a country, the exact day a country will say we're making it legal tender and what that will do to price. Like who's going to be able to predict that? Really nobody. So I still like these rough models, but again, I'm getting further away from all of the on-chain stuff because I'm not selling. I'm not going to sell.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. And, Plan B has also come out and said all models are wrong, but some are useful. So, at the end of the day, I think that the stock to flow is useful. And, yeah, I mean, I still like looking at it and kind of looking at it week to week to see if any drastic changes are happening. But, I'm still following the price too. And like, I mean, I follow the price almost, I don't know, almost daily. I would say more probably closer to weekly at this point now, just because of all the things that we're doing related to it. So the only time I think I really check on a daily basis is if our group message popping off, texting corn left and right. So
what's so funny, man, is that some of you may know I buy hourly, but I check the price weekly. Like I check the price. I look at Glassnode once a week. That's not, I see the price when I get the hourly buy confirmations, but it's so interesting that like before I was doing the hourly buy thing, I was opening up these apps and looking at the price constantly. And now that I hourly buy, it's like, I just don't like the more I buy on shorter time frames, the longer my time frame is between checking prices. So I don't know. That to me, Brandon, is why I think I'm more of a maxi than you. I think you're more of like a Bitcoin minimalist and I'm like a Bitcoin maximalist. You'd be like, if we're talking running footwear, you would be like you'd be like a barefoot guy, and I would be like the Hokas with like the 3-inch heel. You know what I mean? Like I'd be running in high heels. I'm so much of a maxi. What do you think about that?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, I mean, our Bitcoin stories are public. So, I mean, you could check our interviews on Bitcoin Stoa and, the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast to know that I've been in Bitcoin a lot longer than Dan. And, I took you into this world. I could take it out. I take you out. Just like your mother told you at one point in time.
I got into Bitcoin in 1983, and I've been in ever since, and I've been a bull ever since, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise,
You're right.
Including myself and other podcasts. All right, dude, let's wrap. This thing's going to take so long to download. It's going to be fucking nuts, but let's wrap with this, dude. I want to do this. Brandon, what about this last week makes you bullish about Bitcoin, the most bullish about Bitcoin? Like, what's the best news? What to you is the most exciting thing that you saw this week?
Ooh, well, I'm not gonna say like what's the most bullish. I'll say my favorite story was basically Big Balls Bukele telling the IMF to fuck right off. So that was my favorite story. I don't think that makes like a very bullish outlook. I don't think that's gonna really affect the price or anything. That just kind of has me in the background, just like pumping it up, just like yelling and screaming at Bukele. But what about you? What's your story, and what makes you bullish going forward?
It's the same for me. It's the same for me, man. I love seeing that. And then, I think it was more last week's news with Intel getting involved and things like that. But just in general, we're seeing the Russian government, the U.S. government. We're seeing massive corporations like Intel. Didn't we? Oh, you know what we should talk about was Nike. Like Nike's hiring now someone for their metaverse thing, which I'm super bearish on the metaverse, but like these massive companies are starting to realize like, oh, hey, the digital world is here to stay. And at some point, they're going to realize like if we want to monetize that, we need a digital payment system. And one of the things that I love so much about Dorsey now, shocker to everybody, is that Dorsey understands that the global digital payment will be Bitcoin, and for good reason. And so it's going to be interesting, man, because I think what we're going to see is so many people. I'm not included in this list. I was never a shitcoiner, never have been, never will be. Everyone knows that about me. Brandon, on the other hand, big time shitcoiner, huge Doge bag holder. It'll be interesting to watch companies like Nike go through the shitcoin.
Please don't disclose my holdings. Thank you.
Like, yeah, but it'll be interesting to see, like, does Nike go through the shitcoin phase before realizing like, oh, this is a shitcoin. We actually need a harder money, and they go to Bitcoin. Like, it's going to be so interesting to me to watch which companies go through that shitcoiner phase. I think AMC's already going through it. They're taking Doge and all this fucking nonsense. They're going to go through the shitcoiner phase. That I would say most people that get into Bitcoin went through a shitcoiner phase. Again, myself not included. Always been a maxi. Always have been. Always will be. Everybody knows that about me. Brandon, not so much, but me, 100%.
You're a joke, Kuman. You're a fucking joke. That's all I gotta say.
Whoa, dude.
All right.
No government names. No government names.
All right. Green candles rolling out. I'm tired of hearing this bullshit out of this guy.
All right, let's wrap it up, man. All right. So, hey, Brandon, I'm Dan. We got Green Candle here. Obviously, you're on our channel. Go ahead and tickle that like button down there. Subscribe for more updates and give us a sub. We're just trying to push out as much content as possible. The other places you can find us, we put out 3 weekly newsletters on Substack. So we'll link to that below. Maybe even our post-production guy will maybe even put something like right here. And then, so you can subscribe to that. We do every Monday. We put out a stock breakdown. Brandon and I just kind of randomly select a company, and one of us takes the bear case, one of us takes the bull case, just completely dependent on how we're feeling that week. And we just break down the company, how we think about it in the macro environment that we're currently in. Every Wednesday, we do an informational newsletter. I guess you could call it educational. We just kind of pick topics. Right now, we're doing a retirement series, so check that out. And then every Friday, of course, excuse me, a couple spicy waters deep here. Every Friday, we do our Bitcoin newsletter, State of Bitcoin, formerly known as State of the Coin. And yeah, it's all about Bitcoin. We combine off-chain and on-chain news. And we just try to give people a general update on what's going on in the Bitcoin world for that week. Brandon, tell people about our spaces. I always forget our spaces. This time I remembered, but you do a good job pitching them.
Yeah, so we follow us on Twitter at Green Candle IT. We're going to be linking that below as well. Probably on Dan's head, right on the face, right there, maybe on his degrees or something like that. But we got Twitter Spaces that we do on Tuesday nights. That's a little bit more macro, overall government feeling, stocks. And we talk a little bit about Bitcoin mining stocks and stuff like that, but we try to avoid just talking strictly about the underlying Bitcoin asset, because Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time, that's our world famous Bitcoin happy hour. We do that every single Friday. We talk about a lot of these stories that we covered in this video here. So if you don't get to check out this video before then, you could kind of get us some of our opinions, or if you got some questions after you watch this video, feel free to jump in and we'll let you up, and you guys can tell us a dirty joke or ask us some questions about Bitcoin. So yeah, that's all I got. We got a Twitter, Instagram at Green Candle IT. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're trying to get it to grow. Let us know what you think. We just started these videos. Both, I think this is our third one with both Dan and I in it. I know Dan did a little bit before flying solo dolo, but yeah, let us know what you think, how we're doing. Yeah, we're welcoming feedback here or there. We want to keep doing this stuff. We have fun doing it. So let us know if you guys are enjoying it as much as we are. I think that's it for me.
All right. Yeah. Hey, everybody, comment below. Who's cooler, me or Brandon? All right. That's it for us. Bing bong, Brandon. See you.
We out.
Yeah, we're out. We'll see you right after. I'm going to end this. I'm going to end this, Brandon. I'm going to end the recording, and then I'll see you in the Zoom meeting after that. Not next week, literally right after I end this. Peace. Have a great weekend, everybody.